Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're digging into something you wanted to know more about.
Okay.
You were curious about this idea of a prosperous Christian, but you want to get past, just the money-focused interpretation of that.
Right, yeah.
So to help us out with that, we're looking at this interesting clip from a Christian TV network.
Yep.
It's a pastor named Jerry Udo. He's talking about his book, Future Perfect, which is all about the 7 laws of being a prosperous Christian.
It took him 8 years to write that book.
Wow.
8 years. And apparently, he even says that he initially struggled to really define what a prosperous Christian even looked like.
Oh, that's interesting, especially with all the debate about, whether Christians should even be wealthy at all.
Exactly.
It's a tricky subject.
Yeah, it is. And it sounds like writing this book was a real journey for him. I mean, he started off thinking about prosperity in that classic money-making sense. But it seems like he felt led to a much broader understanding of what it really means.
Okay, so let's get into that then. What does Pastor Udo say prosperity really is?
Well, one of the first things he does is he actually draws this distinction between wealth and prosperity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he says they're not necessarily the same thing at all.
Okay, so it's more than just, having a big bank account then.
Yeah, much more. He talks about 3 different levels of prosperity that he sees.
Okay.
And the first one is what he calls material prosperity.
Okay.
And this isn't about, becoming a millionaire or anything.
Right.
It's more about God providing for all of your needs, whether those are personal needs or your family's needs or even the resources you need to actually fulfill whatever your calling in life is.
So it's more about having what you need to do what you're meant to do?
Exactly.
I like that it takes the pressure off of trying to keep up with everyone else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he uses this great analogy to describe this idea of material prosperity.
Okay, what's that?
He says that you're a steward, not an owner of whatever material blessings you have. So you're accountable to God for how you use them.
Stewardship. That adds another layer to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about having things. It's about managing them responsibly in a way that honors God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter if you have a lot or a little. The key is to use what you do have in a way that lines up with God's will for you.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the second level of prosperity then?
The second level is prosperity in health.
Okay.
And again, it's not about being perfectly healthy or never getting sick.
Right, because let's face it, everybody deals with health issues at some point.
Exactly. It's more about having the strength and the well-being to fulfill your purpose.
Whatever that looks like for you.
Whatever that looks like, yeah.
So it's not about, being free from difficulty. It's more about having what you need to move forward in spite of the difficulties.
That's a great way to put it. And he gives some really interesting examples of this in the video.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he talks about people who have achieved amazing things and lived really fulfilling lives, even though they face some pretty serious health challenges.
Wow.
And he says their strength and their perseverance comes from God's grace.
That's powerful. It kind of makes you wonder if our typical definition of good health is too narrow. What if it's less about being symptom-free?
Yeah.
And more about having the resilience to thrive no matter what's going on?
That's a really interesting point.
Like maybe those health challenges are actually part of our story, part of what shapes us and leads us closer to God.
That's a really thought-provoking idea. What if our struggles actually refine us?
Yeah.
And make us depend on God more?
Okay, so we've got material prosperity and prosperity in health.
Right.
What's the third level?
The third level, and maybe the most important one, is prosperity of the spirit.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
So this one is about having the right spirit working within you.
Okay.
Specifically the Holy Spirit, to keep you aligned with God's will.
It's like a compass.
Exactly like a compass guiding you in the right direction.
Okay. I can see why this one is so important.
It's about that deep personal connection with God that influences every area of your life.
So it's about that inner foundation, that spiritual well-being that allows you to use your material blessings wisely and face those health challenges with grace.
Exactly. Pastor Udo says that it's this connection with the Holy Spirit that fuels your love for God. It helps you resist temptation.
Yeah.
And it empowers you to really make a difference in the world for him.
It seems like without this spiritual prosperity, the other two kinds might not actually lead to real fulfillment,
Yeah.
Like you could have all the money and perfect health in the world, But if you're not spiritually connected, it might not really mean much.
It's exactly what he's saying.
Wow, it really shifts your perspective on what it means to be truly prosperous, doesn't it?
It really does. And this third level, prosperity of the spirit, it really seems to be the key to unlocking the other two levels in a way that brings genuine and lasting fulfillment.
So we've got these three levels then: material, health, and spirit.
Right.
And it sounds like Pastor Udo is saying that they all work together, that you need all three to really be prosperous.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that Pastor Udo says that he finds this book to be super impactful.
Really?
Yeah. He says he learns new things every time he reads it.
That's amazing. I mean, it makes you wonder about what his journey was like while he was writing it. Yeah.
8 years battling through distractions. He even lost his first manuscript at one point.
Wow.
It sounds like the whole process of writing the book was a real testament to these very principles.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what those 7 laws are.
Right.
What steps does he lay out to help people achieve this kind of holistic prosperity?
Well, that's where we'd have to actually dive into the book to find out.
Yeah.
This is just a little taste of what Pastor Udo has to say.
A little glimpse.
A glimpse, yeah.
But even this little glimpse gives us so much to think about.
It does.
It really reframes the whole conversation about what it means to be successful as a Christian.
Absolutely. And it challenges those who say, Christians shouldn't be wealthy.
Yeah.
He seems to be saying it's not about the wealth itself.
Right.
It's about your attitude toward it.
It all comes back to stewardship. Seeing what you have as tools to fulfill God's purpose.
Yeah. And remembering that true prosperity goes way beyond just material possessions. It's about being in line with God's will for every part of your life.
This idea of prosperity and health is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about that?
I think what really hit me was how Pastor Udo talked about, finding fulfillment even when you're dealing with health challenges.
Yeah.
It makes you think differently about your limitations. Instead of seeing them as these roadblocks in your way,
right.
What are there actually chances to really rely on God's strength?
Yeah.
He even gave this example of a woman. She was diagnosed with a chronic illness pretty early in life.
Wow.
And the doctors basically told her she wouldn't be able to live a normal life.
Oh, man.
Let alone pursue her dream of being a missionary.
That's tough.
It is.
Yeah.
So did she just give up on her dream?
I mean, it would be understandable.
Yeah. But she didn't.
Oh, wow.
She actually saw her diagnosis as this challenge, to lean even more heavily on God.
Okay.
And she actually ended up becoming a successful missionary.
That's incredible.
I know, right?
Wow.
She worked in all these remote villages and touched so many lives.
That's amazing.
She even wrote several books about her experiences.
Yeah.
Pastor Udo uses her story as this example of how God's grace can do more than just sustain us when things are hard.
Yeah.
It can actually use those hardships to shape us, to make our character stronger,
right,
and equip us to do even greater things.
It really challenges how we typically think about success, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
What if instead of trying to be perfectly healthy all the time, we focused on, developing the resilience and the faith to thrive no matter what comes our way?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the stories we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
Are we so busy trying to avoid being uncomfortable?
Right.
That we miss out on the strength that comes from leaning on God when things are tough.
It's like those difficult times. Maybe they're not meant to break us. No. Maybe they're meant to refine us.
Exactly. They can actually force us to depend on God in ways we never thought we could.
Okay, so let's talk about this third level of prosperity.
Okay.
This prosperity of the spirit.
Yeah.
It seems like this is kind of the foundation for the other two, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Pastor Udo makes it clear that a strong connection to the Holy Spirit is super important.
Yeah.
He says without it, we might not have the wisdom to manage the material blessings we do have.
Right.
Or the inner strength to handle those health challenges with grace.
So it's not about, just getting rich or never getting sick. It's about that connection with God and letting that guide everything else.
Think of it this way. Imagine someone wins the lottery.
Okay.
Suddenly they've got tons of money.
Right.
But they've never really learned about being a good steward or being generous. So they might end up making bad decisions with that money.
Yeah.
Maybe even hurting themselves or others.
That's a good point.
It shows how without that spiritual grounding, material wealth can actually be a problem.
And the same could be said for health, right?
Exactly.
Like if someone's got perfect health, but they're not compassionate or humble,
Yeah, they might not use that good health to actually help others.
Right, or glorify God.
That's a great point. It shows how important prosperity of the spirit is for living a life that's truly fulfilling and impactful.
So it's not about chasing after these external signs of success.
Right.
It's more about building that connection with God on the inside.
Yeah.
And then letting that shape every other area of your life.
Exactly. And that's something anyone can work on.
Yeah.
No matter what your circumstances are or how strong your faith is right now.
Right.
It's a journey, not a destination.
That reminds me of something Pastor Udo said in the video.
Yeah.
He said that this whole idea of prosperity, it's not some checklist you have to complete. It's this lifelong process of growing and changing.
He's right. It's about constantly deepening our relationship with God. And trusting that he'll lead us toward the kind of prosperity he has planned for us.
And that plan might look different for each of us.
Exactly. We all have our own path.
Yeah.
But the basic principles is the same. Seeking that connection with God and letting him guide us to a more fulfilling life.
This has been such a different way of thinking about prosperity than I'm used to.
I know, me too.
It's so much deeper and more well-rounded.
It is.
I'm really glad we got to explore this.
Me too.
Hopefully this has sparked some new thoughts for our listeners about what it really means to live a prosperous life.
I think we've just barely scratched the surface of Future Perfect today.
Yeah, just a little taste.
But it's definitely a book worth checking out.
I agree. We'd love to hear what you think about all this.
Yeah.
What stands out to you most about these 3 levels of prosperity?
And how can you actually put these principles into practice in your own life?
It's easy to get so caught up in just trying to get ahead in life, like chasing after money or what other people think of us.
Right.
But what Pastor Udo is saying is so important. True prosperity, it really starts on the inside.
It does.
With that connection to the Holy Spirit.
You got it. And from that connection comes the wisdom to manage our money well. And the strength to face those hard times with grace.
Yeah. It's like that saying.
What's that?
Bloom where you're planted.
Oh, yeah.
We can't always control what happens to us.
Right.
But we can control how we respond to it.
Absolutely.
And that's where that prosperity of the Spirit is so powerful. It helps us thrive no matter what.
He reminds us that we don't have to have it all figured out either.
Yeah.
We can just take that next step in faith, trusting that God will guide us.
Yeah, toward that abundant life he has for us.
Exactly.
So as you go about your week, think about those 3 levels of prosperity.
Yeah.
What does it look like to be a good steward of what you have?
How can you embrace prosperity and health by focusing on resilience and seeking God's strength when you're struggling?
Yeah. And most importantly, how can you make that prosperity of the Spirit a priority?
By really nurturing your relationship with God.
Right.
And letting him lead you on this journey.
Those are the questions Pastor Udo is asking us to think about.
They are.
And I think they're worth coming back to over and over again as we grow.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope this has given you some things to ponder and inspired you to seek true prosperity in every area of your life. We'll see you next time for another exciting